morning. It's good to see you all this morning. I am Pastor Luke Hughes. I am the adult discipleship and teaching pastor here at Midway, and I'm excited to be with you guys this morning. Who else is excited? A little bit closer to Christmas. It was a great worship set, wasn't it? It was awesome, man. God is really moving this morning, and we are in a series called The Gift That No One Wanted. Now, I'll let you a little bit behind the curtain, okay? I have argued for this series for about the past 2 years, and no one has really gone for it. Now, it had a terrible name when it started. I called it re-gift. You know what I mean? Like you get a gift, and you're like, oh, this is terrible. I'm going to give it to someone else. But we're here in the third week of the gift that no one wanted. And it's a series about Jesus, which is awkward because you don't normally say mean things about Jesus. You know what I mean? Like the gift that no one wanted. No, he's the everlasting Father, and he's the gift that everyone should want. And that is true. But many times in our lives, we don't live that way. And so we're discussing and looking through what are some of the possible hang-ups or some of the problems and disruptions that are within our lives that may bring us to a point when we meet Jesus where we go, nah, I don't want that. I don't want that. Now, in the spirit of Christmas, we've all had a nah, I don't really want that moment. You know what I'm talking about? I remember I was about 3-4 years old, and it was one of the first Christmases I could really remember. I was at my great-grandmother's house in Perry, Florida, down there in the middle of, the Florida scrub brush, and I had a Christmas gift come Christmas morning, and I unwrapped it, and it was a brand spanking new He-Man power sword. You guys remember He-Man back in the day? And so there it was. I'm sure my dad had hopes and dreams that I would slay foes in the backyard all afternoon and leave him alone so he could eat Christmas snacks. You know what I mean? And so I got this He-Man power sword. But the thing about this He-Man power sword was it had a button on it. And when you press the button, it said He-Man's favorite phrase. Okay, now does anybody here remember He-Man back from the late 80s, early 90s? Okay, do you remember his motto, his saying? You remember? Okay, well, let's all say it together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I have the power. But now you got to remember, this is the early 90s, right? You know what I mean? And so voice recording technology was not great in the early 90s. So it was more like, rah, 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 you know what I mean? And it terrified me. It terrified me. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't expect this, inanimate object to start talking at me. And so, my mom and dad, they have this wonderful video, because someone had a camcorder back then, of my 3-year-old, self in my underwear running down the hallway, terrified of this sword. And I had a lot of great aunts and uncles, because my great-grandmother had a lot of kids. And so they just thought it was hilarious the rest of the day to just randomly have it under the table, you know what I mean? Or just, because family stinks sometimes. No, I'm just kidding. And so, it's just, and I take off. It's a gift that no one really wants. My dog, Oli, he usually gets something special at Christmas, and we spent a lot of money on him. He got a $135 Christmas gift this year. Spoil my dog. Now, typically, what happens is he goes to the vet, and he gets his nails clipped and his hair cut, and he gets a bath. But this time, in December, he got neutered. He got neutered. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Oli. He looked at me and was like, dude, you don't know what they were cutting on this time. Typically, it's my nails, it's my hair. It wasn't my hair and nails this time, Luke. What did you do to me? I'm very interested to see what he thinks when he goes back for grooming in a month or so. Like, post-traumatic stress, you know what I mean? Like, he's going to be free. Because sometimes at Christmas, we get gifts we don't want. Sometimes at Christmas, we get gifts we don't want. But you know what's so interesting about this time is we find ourselves moving, getting gifts, buying gifts, trying to create memories for people, even in the stress of the times that we find ourselves in, trying to bring people together, trying to have a moment that people will remember. And if you're like me, Many times what happens is you get to the end of the season and you look back over all that you've tried to accomplish, maybe from post-Halloween on, and then you ask yourself, did it really matter? Did it really count towards what really matters? And sometimes, the answer is yes, but a lot of times, if you're honest with yourself and you're like me, you look around and you go, man, a lot of what I did was a colossal movement towards missing the point. That I got stressed out, anxiety filled, and ultimately more and more selfish through the time of year where the motto seems to continually be to give is better than to receive. And you may say, well, no. I did all this stuff for everybody else. You know what I mean? Like I was out there and I was serving. And then you look inside and you realize that even maybe in that serving, it was something you were trying to fulfill. It was something that you were looking for in those moments. And it still doesn't feel right. It feels like selfishness is kind of taken hold. And if you're on that wavelength with me, if you've felt and understood that before, then today as we open the scriptures and go to Matthew chapter 2, I think we're going to begin to unpack what is really going on in regards to what is our focus about in our lives. Where are we centralized? What are we thinking about and looking at? And why does it make a difference, ultimately, where we put our faith and trust? So if you have your copy of God's Word, you can go to Matthew chapter 2. We're going to start in verse 1. We're going to look at a very interesting character this morning as we unpack this together. Hopefully you'll be able to understand who it is before I even say their name. Matthew chapter 2, verse 1, beginning. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem, in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child, and as soon as you find him, report it to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Go down to verse 16. When Herod realized that they had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys born in Bethlehem and its vicinity, who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Now, I just want to start off by saying this. Due to a scheduling error, I got to preach this message not on Baby Dedication Sunday, because that would have been awkward. But you have this character, Herod. King Herod. And what's interesting is this passage, it revolves around Herod, and this is the only time in the New Testament that Herod is actually a main character in the scriptures. And not only that, it's Herod the Great. So this is actually the father of the Herod that we meet later in the crucifixion story, who is Herod Antipas. And so Herod the Great got that moniker because he was the first real stable ruler in Israel after the Jewish dynasties were brought down by the Greeks and the Romans. And so Herod the Great was a king of kings in the nation of Israel and the surrounding area of Palestine. And the reason I bring this up is because much of this passage and the attitudes around it revolve around this man. And really, to be honest, we don't know a whole lot about him typically in everyday life. I don't know, maybe you have watched some Herod the Great documentaries, so you know all about Herod the Great. And if so, you're a nerd. You're a nerd like me. But Herod was Idumean. And what that is actually from the southern parts of Palestine or Israel. And so he wasn't Jewish. He wasn't from the line of David. He wasn't from the tribes of Abraham. He was Idumean and therefore kind of an outsider in the realm of the Jewish world. And so because of that, Herod actually became a Jewish convert. So Herod was introduced to Judaism and accepted and became a full-fledged believer in Yahweh and in the Jewish system. Now, all accounts that come from historical records of that time, this seemed to be an honest transition, that he actually did this. Now, the reason Herod became king in this area is because he was a masterful politician. So he backed the right leaders at the right times in different areas and different regions to continue to gain and solidify power, but he also had a trump card. Herod had spent a lot of time in Rome, and so he had powerful friends who were a part of the Roman government at the time. One you may know, his name was Caesar Augustus. And so Herod was actually really good friends with the Caesar that eventually came to power in the time of Jesus, right? You remember from Luke last week when Pastor Chad was speaking, right, in the days of Caesar Augustus. It's that Caesar Augustus. And so Caesar gave Herod his kingship in Palestine. And so Herod ruled. Now, Herod was actually a very effective leader. He gets critiqued for being violent, but you got to give it to him. The violence was effective because all throughout that region, we went to Jerusalem and Israel 2 years ago now, it seems, and you look through it, there's still buildings standing that Herod the Great had built. He built amphitheaters, places of governance that people used for hundreds of years throughout that region. But the thing that he is most known for, the reason that he's called Herod the Great by the Jews, is because he rebuilt the temple on the Temple Mount. So Herod, being a Jewish convert, understood the importance of what it meant to rebuild the temple. It's called the Temple of Herod, on the Temple Mount after it had been destroyed. And so he endeared himself to a lot of the ruling class and politicians at that time because he was willing to stick out his neck a little bit to get that project ultimately completed. And so Herod the Great was his moniker because he had done a lot of great things in this process. And this is the character that we meet in the story. Herod, having grown up in a time of political intrigue, in a time where nothing was really stable, had established order and justice. And you meet this man in and amongst the pages of the scripture as the gospel writer in Matthew is telling us. But we quickly reach the crux of the matter, because what's interesting is the point of impact happens within family. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't know, you're going to know, right? Because you just had Thanksgiving, you're going to have Christmas. A lot of times our points of impact happen within the family. And Herod had a pretty crazy family. In fact, when I was researching several years ago and looking through Herod's life, Herod had 10 wives. Now, you may say, well, that seems odd, but, it's not unheard of. Solomon had a lot more. Well, that is true, but you also have to remember that Herod was a practicer of the Jewish faith. And so Judaism at this time, you were a one-woman man. I guess it was hazy on how many women you could have, but you could only have one at a time. So that means Herod married and divorced, married and divorced, married and divorced. And the crazy thing is, in the historical accounts, it got so crazy, mixed up. Maybe it's like some of y'all's family reunions when you go over to Alabama. I don't know. But, there are just question marks by some of these people's names, like maybe Herod married him, We don't know. And that's true of any family a lot of the time. And so, points of impact. Well, this is where it comes to the crux of the matter. Because the reason Herod was doing this over and over and over again was because he was trying to solidify his kingship. Because he was a Jewish convert, and though he had the favor of Rome, he did not have any necessary bloodlines by which to actually claim the throne in the eyes of the people. And so, this is the moment that we reach in Matthew chapter 2, beginning in verse 2. It says, Magi came from the east to Jerusalem, and they asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star and when it rose and have come to worship him." When Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. Now, the reason Herod is disturbed is because these magi come around and they start asking these weird questions. They say, "Where's the one that has been born King of the Jews?" And Herod goes, "That's me. I'm the king." And they're like, no, we're not talking about you. We're talking about the guy who was born King of the Jews. So what were they saying? Oh, we're coming to see the king and the ruler who is of the line of David. You're not from the line of David. We all know that. This new king, he is from the line of David. And so Herod in this moment is disturbed. Because what's crazy is, one, Herod is getting older, and in a few months, possibly even after this impact moment with the Magi, Herod will pass away, and that's why we have Herod Antipas later in the gospel narratives. But in this moment, Herod has grown more paranoid. He's grown more power hungry, more concerned about his legacy. In fact, what's crazy about Herod's family is he married all these women, and I'm sure probably had to remarry a lot of them, because what happened is he started to have progeny and offspring with these women, and anytime someone got old enough to challenge him for the throne, he'd just kill him. So over and over again in Herod's story, you'd see him growing more and more paranoid to the point where he finally just kills his own son so that he can maintain control. He's worked so hard for it, and so this is what he's planned on doing. And what's crazy is, it's where we get this quip from Caesar Augustus. Later on, Caesar Augustus is reported as saying in Rome that it was safer to be a pig in Herod's house, because he was Jewish, a pig would probably be pretty safe, than to be a son in Herod's house. Because if you were a pig, hey, it's unkosher to eat you. If you were a son, you were probably going to get murdered. And so Caesar Augustus quips, it's better to be a pig in Herod's house than a son. Because he was so desperate for power and control. Which leads us to the first point I want us to understand today that we impact with this passage, and it's this. When we accept Jesus, we lose our power, but we gain his promise. See, there's a great irony here in this moment, because like we said, Herod was probably a legitimate Jewish convert. And with being a legitimate Jewish convert, he was concerned with the Temple Mount. And so he had built a temple, a place of ominous reputation to the Old Testament prophecies about the coming king and the reign of God in and amongst his people. He had built that place. He was responsible for all the stones that now stood there. But then when the very one that was going to rule comes, Herod doesn't want to give up his control. You have this awkward moment where the Messiah of promise comes and is brought forth, and he's told about it. It's announced to him by these magi. But all of a sudden, Herod starts thinking about all the stuff he's had to give up and sacrifice and do to be the ruler. See, being a Jewish convert, you would think that he would understand, the Messiah needs to reign because it's the promise of the Messiah that makes everything right again. It's the promise of the Messiah that restores everything to the world. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think Herod in this moment knew all the fulfillment of what was going on that would come through the years of Jesus' life and teaching. But in this moment, the promise of the Messiah hangs clear in Herod's mind. And he understood it because the political motivations by which he took to try and extinguish the flame of of the promise of the Messiah shows that he understood that this man would have power and allegiance and would heal the nations and would be something of the line of David by blood, someone different than Herod himself. And so in this moment, Herod has a choice to make. The promise of the Messiah, Isaiah says it like this: "How beautiful on the mountain are the feet of those who bring good news, who proclaim peace, who bring good tidings, who proclaim salvation, who say to Zion, your God reigns. Listen, your watchmen lift up their voices. Together they shout for joy. When the Lord returns to Zion, they will see it with their own eyes. Burst into songs of joy together, you ruins of Jerusalem. For the Lord has comforted his people. He has redeemed Jerusalem. The Lord will lay bare his holy arm in the sight of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth will see the salvation of our God." See, in this moment, in the words of these magi, they come and say, where is the one that has been born King of the Jews? It brings the promise of the Messiah, of salvation. See, Herod could have been a watchman standing on the wall, giving up his power, saying, okay, here he comes. The moment of salvation for all the nations has come. But the first thing Herod does is he looks and he goes, wait, you're telling me I'm going to have to get off the throne? I'm not going to be in control anymore? And Herod doesn't want any part of it. His denial in this moment of decision leads him to do unthinkable things. Because see, if Herod wanted to be a watchman for Yahweh, then that means Jesus is king. But if Jesus is king, then Herod is not. And if Jesus is Lord, then Herod is not. And so in that moment he says, I don't want any part of what's going on right now. Which leads us to the second point today. When we accept Jesus, we will lose our rights. Oh, excuse me, that's the third point. Second point. When we accept Jesus, we will lose our control. We will lose our control, but we will gain his clarity. We will lose our control, but we will gain his clarity. See, you have this surreal moment, right? Because all of a sudden, Herod says no. And you have these magi who had come so far from the east. And you have this moment set up at the beginning of the Gospels where the Jewish convert, who actually was responsible for building the temple on the Temple Mount, the place that was so pivotal for the returning of the Messiah, is now trying to murder that Messiah, who's a baby, 5 miles away. While these Gentile men, who had nothing to do, as far as we can tell, with Yahweh, who had come to the Messiah based on a practice that the Old Testament doesn't really support in astrology and signs of the heavens to bring about their coming in the first place, are looking to worship the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords and give their lives in a new and a powerful way. So those that were supposed to hold on and move in the promise of the Messiah have said no, but those that are coming with zero context, broken, wounded sinners are saying, yes, we'll do anything. What do you need from us, Jesus? And you have this moment. When we accept Jesus, we will lose our control, but gain his clarity. Gain his clarity. See, it's interesting because it's funny how in this moment that we see how muddled things get. Right? Because once Herod says no, he's going to do anything to protect his power. He's going to look around and allies become enemies, enemies become allies. He's going to look around and he's going to say, okay, well, what's most important? What's most important is that I maintain my rulership and my power by whatever means necessary. Now, he's already kind of slipped into that because he's murdering and killing his own children and wives to maintain his political control. But he takes it a step further and he says, oh, this is the promised one? Well, if this is the promised one, if I cut it off at the knees, I don't even have to worry about it. So in Herod's mind, what I guess he was thinking was, well, God, he ain't that great. If I kill his chosen one, then I get to inherit everything. I get to own the vineyard. And what you have is this moment of ridiculous muddling to the priorities of what it truly means to be alive. And what's so crazy is we understand this, right? Because it's an interesting thing in 2020 to talk about losing control. I think that for a lot of us, we'd say, oh, I was in control of this, and I was really moving with that, and we were on a course, and we were making it, and then all of a sudden, it kind of all went away. The parameters shifted. The environment changed. Why? Because we were never in control. We were never in control. It was an illusion. To think that you are the captain of your soul, that in some ways that you are the pinnacle of your existence, that you're the smartest person in the room, it's a myth. You're not in control. But see, the beauty in wisdom is that it's better for a man to give up that which he does not have to gain what he cannot lose. And so when we trust and give ourselves to Jesus, we lose the ability to hold on to our control, but we gain the clarity about what's truly important. See, it's why even in these tumultuous times right now, if you're like me, you can look out into society and there are camps for things and there are parties for things and there are ideologies about things. But when you look at those people within those parties, you realize that it's really still just a human issue. And when you look at some of the vitriol, some of the jealousy, some of the hate, some of the murder, some of the pain that's in both of these camps, you go, no, thank you. No, thank you. I don't want it. I don't want it. And it happens on both sides of the spectrum. Why? Because this is the dirty little secret of keeping yourself in control. See, as long as we hold on to our control, we think, oh, well, maybe in the best of circumstances, it's a neutral decision, right? Because I came into this world, I was in control. And I can control myself and hold on to my kingdom in a way that's good. So I'll do good things with me being in control because, God, the one thing I hate, the one thing I fear more than anything is giving you control. So if I give up my license to take it back and do what I want, then who's to say you're not going to make me miserable? Or who's to say I'm not going to need it and realize how dumb I was when I gave it to you? But you being in control of your life and your heart is not a neutral decision. Because you are a usurper and a rebel against the king who is supposed to truly sit on that throne. You are in rebellion against the true center of the universe when you say that you are the center of the universe. And that is not a neutral decision. So you stand opposed to the reality of the world that you live in when you say, I am the center. I am the center. And that's why when you look around at all of these ideologies and parties, all of these moments where people are trying to make themselves the center, it doesn't resonate with who you ultimately are because it's muddled and it's garbage. It's not clear until you take the mindset and the heart of the Father who is above it all and sees exactly the worth of every individual on this planet. Until you see people like Jesus saw people. See, Jesus didn't say, I'm not going to get crucified for Democrats. Jesus didn't say, I'm not going to get crucified for President Trump. What Jesus sees in every individual is the God-given life and potential that his grace can bring about once again when they give up control. When they give up control. When you give up your control, you gain clarity about what's truly important. Do you feel like you're running amok, that you can't find a focus in a centrality and a mission for your life? You probably still have control. You probably still have control. Which leads to heartbreak. Because what happens is when we remain in control, we ultimately end up in places that we never thought we'd go. And you see it right here in the passage, right? Verse 16. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, when Herod realized he wasn't in control, he thought he was in control, but he wasn't in control anymore, he was furious. And he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time that he had learned from the Magi. You know what happens when we selfishly continually try to hold on to our control? When we say, no, 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 God, you don't get to be the center of my life. I'm going to be the center of my life. Innocent things die. Innocent things die. Relationships die. People you care about die. The things that you've worked for with your hands, your castles made out of sand, die. Why? Because ultimately you reveal what's most important to you, and it's you. So everything else isn't worth you. And that's the opposite of the mindset of Jesus. See, we look at her and we go, I can't believe this terrible, horrible person, that he would kill innocent children, that he would think of his own livelihood, his own ease of life. The fact that he would have to struggle in some different way because of the new realities that he had brought about upon himself. That he would kill innocent children to make his life easier. What kind of society would allow that? What kind of society would allow that? In your life and in my life, when I am in control, innocent things will die. Innocent things will die. We can only be trusted when we give up our control and gain the clarity of the mission of Jesus, who came saying, I lay down my life for each and every one of you. The final point is this morning. When we accept Jesus, we will lose our rights. We will lose our rights, but we will gain a relationship with him. When we accept Jesus, we lose our rights, but we gain a relationship with him. Now, you know what's funny about relationships? There's always some level of trading in your rights to be in a relationship. Have you ever noticed that for the most part, in most of the fights or the conflicts that you find yourselves in and amongst people, it's because you're not willing to lay down your rights? And I understand that because I'm usually always right, you know? And you know, it's hard. My wife and I joke, you know, she says, you know, Luke, you're so pompous sometimes. She says, you always think you're right. I said, well, it's hard for me to think any differently until I'm proven wrong. You know, it's my natural demeanor. I'm probably right. And, you know, one of our biggest fights we ever got in happened around this subject and this idea. We were still dating. We were in college, and we were in Columbus, Georgia. We were going to a family Christmas event, I'm pretty sure. And so this is the thing between me and my wife. I really like to go through the drive-thru. I think it's efficient. You may get your car a little dirty, but, you know, you can always clean your car out later. And I feel like you're maximizing your time. My wife, at least in college, I don't know, she may have changed her opinion now. I guess I should ask. But in college, she hated the drive-thru. She, abhorred the drive-thru. She wanted to go into the restaurant. Well, so we were going to this family Christmas thing. We pull up. I said, hey, you want to get some lunch? She said, Yeah, that's great. We got some time. Let's do it. So I pull up and I'm attempting to get into the drive-thru. And she says, well, we've got plenty of time. Why don't we park and go into the restaurant? And I said, well, we could eat on the way. And I think that would just be more efficient. And so I just pulled on up in the drive-thru. And so my wife, well, back then she wasn't my wife, but, she kind of gets huffy. She's like, huff. She's sitting over there. And I go, oh, what's wrong? I'm just trying to be genteel. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, I'm not eating. I said, okay. And then I did the smart thing like, every college man knows to do. Well, I had dated her for several years, so I knew her Chick-fil-A order. So I just ordered the food. Perfectly, too. Didn't miss a detail. Did not miss a detail. And, and I said, well, you can eat it if you're hungry. You can eat it if you're hungry. And so the food arrived, and she took it, and with great dramatic fashion, she wrapped the bag up, and she threw it in the floor, and she goes, I'm not eating that. And I said, that's fine. I don't care. It's there if you want it. And I proceeded to eat my sandwich as loudly as I could. It's like, this is so good. So good. Well, because I was right. And so she looked at me, and I was there, and I was like, I had my drink, and I was taking out a couple of, putting it down. And she goes, and she takes her gum out, and she sticks it on my straw. So see, yes. She escalated before me, okay? She escalated the situation. Well, I thought, I won't get mad. I'll act like Jesus. And and so I picked the drink up, and I put it in my mouth, and I took the gum, and I started chewing it, and I said, minty, thanks. And in that moment, I started to ponder, man, we're driving up to North Georgia. It's not that far to, veer to Douglasville. I could literally put her on her dad's porch, and he could get her back, I'm sure of it. So I could just leave her there. But I didn't do that. I conceded in that moment. And now she's my wife. God bless her. She's made a terrible decision. But in that moment, the reason things got worse and they escalated is because she and I were not willing to lay down our rights. Right? We were both right. We knew it. And so our relationship suffered because we wouldn't lay down our rights. See, Herod was going to have to lay down his rights if he wanted a relationship with the Messiah. But it's the same for you and me. See, when we go to Jesus, we don't come saying, well, Jesus, listen, I'm right about this and I'm right about that. And listen, and I'm going to take the center stage and be in control on this, but you can have control of that. No. See, if you want to grow in a relationship, if you want to have that relationship have purpose and value and meaning in your life, you have to lay down your rights. When you come to a coach and they say, hey, listen, this is what you're doing wrong, you don't go, nope, I'm going to do it more. I'm doing it right. No, you humble yourself. You say, okay, well, show me how to do it. Show me the correct technique. When you come to a counselor and they say, hey, you need to listen more, talk less, you don't go, I'm going to talk more. So much that you can't hear. I can't even hear you talking. Why? Because you have to lay down your rights to be right in order to have a relationship. See, Jesus says it like this. He says, there's some of you in this crowd. You are so desperate to be in control, to have power in your life, to selfishly hold on to your life. And can I tell you what's going to happen? Like everyone else, Jesus says, you're going to lose it. But if you'll come and lay down your rights, lay down your life for my sake and the sake of the gospel, you know the ironic thing that's going to happen? You're going to find more life than you'd ever dreamed of. Everlasting life. Life that overflows. See, that's the great irony of our human experience, especially in 2020, right? We fought so hard to maintain our power. We fought so hard to maintain our control. We fought so hard to maintain our rights. And you have hurt and you have pushed and you have struggled so that you could survive. And what you learned in that moment is that surviving is never really living. Surviving is never really living. See, one of my personal mottos is not to live, not to die, but to live to find life. And Jesus is the way and the truth and the life. He gives everlasting life. But it's his way, and it's his truth, and it's his life. So if you're tired of just surviving, you can come truly alive in Jesus. But you're going to have to give up your power to find his promise. You're going to have to give up your control to ultimately find that he is enough. You're going to have to lay down your rights to find that relationship with him that truly moves you into eternal life. See, it's the gift no one wants because you have to lay down so much to truly have the thing that is most valuable. But can I tell you something? You can work and work and work and work, and one day you'll reap what you've sown. You'll receive what you're worth. You'll get paid your wages for all the surviving that you did. And Romans says it like this: the wages of all of your selfish, sinful acts is death. But the gift that no one wanted, the gift of God, is eternal life through Christ Jesus our Lord. See, it's ironic, right? Herod spilled so much blood to try and maintain peace. But Jesus gave up his blood to achieve it. Herod killed and sacrificed so many people so that he could remain in control. Jesus made himself the servant to all so that he could guide us and lead us with honesty and truth. Herod ultimately died empty, broken, selfish, and alone. But Jesus gave up his life on a cross. And at his death, all meaning, beauty, and joy were released into our universe to change us from the inside out. Tidings of great joy. If you're here this morning and you want that Jesus in your life, I could have you say a prayer, but the prayer is just symbolic of what you have to do. The prayer is just agreeing with what you're doing in your heart. And that thing that you're doing when you pray, when you ask, when you're looking for God, it's this. You're laying down your control. You're laying down your power. You're laying down the rights to your life. And you're saying, okay, Jesus, I'm going to hold on to your promise. I'm going to hold on to your movement in my life, that you'll save me, change me. I'll do what you say. Turn me around. Lead me in a new way. And you'll never be the same. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes as I pray and close this morning? Jesus, thank you for loving us. And God, thank you for the morning to remember that you are in control, that you have all the power, that you are the one that should have never laid down your rights, for you are the King of kings, the Lord of lords. You are the most beautiful thing in all the universe, most meaningful thing in all the universe. And with all that power, with all that authority, you came to serve us. the Son of Man gave his life for us. We are awed by you, Jesus. It's in your name I pray. Amen.